It's Thursday morning.
It's Thursday morning. Ahoy!
It's actually Thursday morning. We're actually podcasting on a Thursday
I
morning.
look like I have no hair. Oh, there it is.
I also look like I have no hair.
Well, I'm wearing my Luke Danes jacket today. It's on its last leg. Had it for many, many moons. Hello.
Listening to Gin Blossoms wearing your Luke
It's
Danes
just-
jacket.
When the sun comes out, especially, I feel very 90s-ish that I need to listen to some Oasis and Gin Blossoms and
Yeah, I was going with 90s country when the sun came out.
90s
and
country is good.
That was a good thing.
I'm a firm believer
And
that
90s Third Day. I was
Huh?
cranking their first album. which
90s Christian is
I
good.
forgot how good that was. It was really good.
Like 50s, 40s and 50s country and 90s and country is about the only
Yeah,
things I can do.
pretty good stuff. There was some pretty darn good stuff in the 80s with late 80s in particular with the Judds and George Strait, and there's
Reba.
some classic stuff. Reba was getting stronger every minute,
She was getting fancy.
and of course I was in love with Barbara Mandrell throughout the 80s. So
Well, anywho, let me make sure this is all squared away. I probably should have done that before. Good morning, everybody.
we are actually working.
We are actually working. Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Well, it might not be morning when you're listening slash watching this.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of technology.
Technology.
How are you, Richard?
I'm not sure, but if I ask ChatGPT, it can tell me.
You could, which is the scary
Apparently, it
thing.
can tell
Have you
everything.
seen Spotify's new AI feature?
No, I
I
have
don't
not.
like AI. Just gonna throw that out there.
Helpful in some ways.
But Spotify, what's coming for my career?
Yes.
Um,
It's coming for everyone's career.
That's true. But Spotify has a new AI DJ, and you tap on it, and it'll play songs that you listen to frequently, but also songs that I think you like based on those things.
Okay.
And like every 4 or 5 songs, the DJ comes on and talks for a minute.
No, I don't like that.
It's like, "What's up, Stacy?"
Oh no.
So it's like you're listening to your own personal radio station. It's kind of funny, but I like it. I've been into it.
That might freak me out. So
I'm waiting for him to go, "Yo, Stacy."
I'm just trying to figure out when we realize that every movie ever made, every story ever written that involves some form of AI is always dystopian. It always goes badly. It's always the iRobot scenario.
That's why you have to
in
be nice
everything.
to the robots.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the thing. I see people yelling at Siri and being
I'm
rude
like,
to Siri. I'm like,
be
she's
polite
coming
to
for you,
Siri,
man. She's coming
saw-
for you.
I saw a TikTok yesterday, and it was of this robot, like a human.
Did you say Tic Tac?
Tic Tac on the Tic Tac. It was a human-sized
You and
robot.
Kayla.
Human-sized robot, and they taught it how to roundhouse kick. I'm like, maybe let's not teach the robots how to roundhouse kick.
Right, you're training them for the uprising. Why
Let's
would you
not.
do that?
Can we don't? Yeah, let's not do that.
I don't know. I just
Oh, gosh.
read an article, or
I'm even
Blurb.
nice to the Roomba.
a blurb article. I apologize for the Kleenex. About apparently now they have scientists have. It was a female lead scientist. I don't remember her name, but they have developed a nanotechnology robot. Nanotechnology robots, I guess, is the plural would be appropriate. That just like you see in the Avengers movies and all these different kinds of sci-fi things where it's liquid and then it hardens
don't like
to
that.
become harder than steel. And they're working now to make it predictable. They want to use it for surgeries and different applications.
Don't like
And
that.
I'm like, wow, that's just the fact that we're even talking about that as a reality is, I mean, we're so far beyond like the Jetsons kind of, that
And yet
used to
we're
always be the thing.
And yet we're still putting flour in bags that when you open them, it gets all over.
They're real technologies that we need. We're not
need better
dealing with.
containers for things.
Yeah, there's
Powdered sugar everywhere.
there are a lot of things that you look at and you're like, with all the stuff that we're
Right.
doing, it always amazes me with phones. My phone is a more powerful computer than I've ever had in my life until
and
now.
it's in your pocket.
And it's in my pocket. But I still can't get coverage in
Right.
so many areas. I'm like, we're right next to Chicago. How
Right.
can we be how can you
Whenever
be
I'm by the school, I'm like, don't bother.
like, oh, well, you're near the beach. You can't have coverage. I'm like,
Okay.
why not?
Yeah.
Let's put towers on. Do whatever you got to do.
Put towers
You got
in the water.
Satellites
Yeah.
everywhere,
Anyway,
They're always watching. They're always listening, but we can't get. So the Chinese
Oh,
government
he's
can hear
watching.
everything that we're doing, but I
Right.
can't hear you on a phone
I
call.
don't care. My Chinese spy can watch whatever he wants about me. It's
Oh,
all
you got a bunch of them on
it's
your
all
TikTok.
food and cat videos at this point. And robots doing roundhouse kicks.
It's
Anyway,
crazy stuff. Crazy
How are
stuff.
you? We already answered that.
Um,
You're fine.
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's been a tough week. It's been a tough night. I think I broke the recliner, so just
Oh.
everything's just, one of those things. I haven't had coffee yet today.
That's the
which,
worst thing.
I periodically will do that, on purpose.
Are you a masochist or
No, I will not be mastered by anything. So if I ever think that I need to have coffee, I won't have coffee.
wow?
I have coffee because I like to have coffee, but
Trying to be dominant over coffee.
I'm trying to be dominant over everything. But
Your voice got really deep. I'm trying to be dominant. I will find you.
but I need some hot liquid, but I really should want to be
A little-
avoiding the caffeine
little
because
lemon
of
water
the,
for
the
you?
stuff. That was what I had yesterday. So I will probably have some as soon as we get done here. If I'd had a little more time, I would have pulled up some herbal tea to do it. I'm not a tea person,
I don't like tea.
but I'm discovering that there are teas that I can enjoy.
I like a chai. I like a nice chai.
I had a chai last night and it was actually enjoyable. It was a decaffeinated chai black tea, but I didn't put anything in it but honey. And
I gotta have a little milk.
and it was good. I had never heard of chai apart from milk. Right, that's
right.
all that I.
Well, because most people
seen.
have like chai lattes.
Right,
Yeah.
that's the only chai I had ever seen. I didn't realize that
chai
was
it.
apparently it actually means tea. I was told.
So chai
So-
tea is TT.
Right, yeah, apparently.
It's like
So-
ATM machine. Oh, I hate
Right,
when people
right.
say ATM machine.
Yeah,
Stop it.
It's
Read
I
a
don't know.
book.
There's
Anyway,
a
grow up.
lot of crazy stuff.
I'm feeling a little snarky today. So
Really?
yeah,
Is that because of the gin blossoms in your jacket?
it might be. I'm feeling youthful.
Get some spry springtime vibes going on here.
Oh, yeah.
You and my cats.
It's supposed to be quite nasty weather this weekend, though. Like super windy and stormy. And
I can
Then
use
cold
some
again.
wind right now to keep drying stuff out. But right now it's decent. It's it's not
Good kite
not
weather.
as soupy muddy as it was.
no,
it's
things
getting
have
better.
dried out, which is always
Yeah,
pleasant.
I was surprised. Caleb Carr came and dug a hole for me yesterday.
I heard about that. Not a pleasant
and-
hole.
No, but as he was digging it, we were both surprised that it wasn't real wet
mud
underneath. It was drier than expected. It was top of a hill, but it was kind of interesting because you never know. Somehow you think it's dry and it turns out to be soupy and wet. Then I get stuck and I have to call Caleb to come and get me out.
And then you're like,
stuff.
never ending story, which I know you haven't seen. The horse gets stuck in the mud
Oh, that sounds so sad.
and dies.
I don't see.
It's the worst part
this
of that
is why
movie.
I don't like mud.
It's the worst part of that movie.
That somehow reminds me of Animal Farm and Napoleon dying in the mud, but
Pretty kind of
so-
similar. But that boy is trying to pull him out and he won't.
Oh,
Oh,
sad. That's
Anyway.
we have-
spoiler alert! It came out 40 years ago.
over the years we have lost more livestock to mud than anything else.
I believe
that
it.
that I
That's
could
really
think of.
depressing.
So it's a terrible thing. I don't like it, but that's it. I love all four seasons. I just don't like the mud that comes with the
Spring is the
That's-
worst. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Let's
So,
be honest.
but it is, it's not up to me. It's whatever God wills according to His sovereign plan. So
I said this morning the moon was nuts, and I told George there's something on my lip. I told George.
You told George that?
I told George the moon is nuts,
Oh,
and I said,
I thought he could see your lip.
well, no, probably not. It was dark when we were driving. I said, George, look at the moon, and I said, can you believe God did that?
I have Larry the cucumber in my head now.
Maybe.
That's you sound like my mom. Like, look what God did.
Oh yeah, yeah.
that's-
Well, she told him that all summer.
Yeah.
But I'm like, isn't that crazy? And then I had to have this whole big conversation about how the Earth rotates, and that when it's dark here, it's light. And he goes, how in the world?
Kids say the darndest things, right?
Anyway,
That's pretty
not
cool.
so.
The moon has been amazing.
It was
It's
wild.
been pretty crazy stuff.
It was like bright orange, and he wanted to touch it. I'm like, it does look like you can touch it. It's like that close.
middle of the night. We thought aliens were invading.
Grab a piece
we
of cheese off it.
got the the curtains in the bedroom, and all around it you see this like bright outline, like it's like daylight outside. It was crazy how bright the sun was, or the moon was. See, it confused
The
me.
sun.
But it's like wow.
Some
and-
signs things going on. Swing away.
and who was it that was
Ever
it?
seen signs?
Was it you that said it? Did you say this to me earlier? Somebody was saying it's amazing to think about That's just a reflection of the Son.
I didn't say
and I
that.
want to be a reflection of Christ in that way.
Aw,
So somebody very profound said that to me.
then it was
just in the
clearly
last-
not me.
In the last
I'm just like, well, look
day
at the
or so.
moon.
You told your son. Can you believe what God did here?
It's pretty cool.
Excuse me for a moment.
Oh, he's fighting an illness, so talking about the moon gets him all excited.
I'm not fighting an illness. I will not be fighting an illness.
You know, first it's coffee, now it's illness. You can't control everything, Rich. It's not for you to control.
I will not. I don't get sick, and I've already
Oh, you
been
sound
sick
like your-
once.
you sound
and
like
I-
your son.
and I'm not handling it. That's not gonna.
You
That's
sound
not
like
gonna fly.
your youngest son.
Well,
Ugh.
I don't do that, and so
It's not for you to decide.
no, it is not. It's funny because whether you're talking about sickness or coffee or politics or
Let's not talk about politics.
or whatever it is that we're
The
dealing with,
moon.
the moon, it all is according to what God plans, and so
Facts.
He blesses whomever He wills according to His sovereign plan. So
And there's the podcast,
So
ladies.
there we
and gentlemen. No, so that is a long way around a segue to get into what we talked about.
there's a little more work today than normal, isn't it?
But there was a lot to talk
So-
about because we didn't meet last week, so we had to do some nonsense.
It's getting to be almost an every other week podcast
Well,
at this point.
We had to do some nonsensical jabbering
Yes.
as per usual.
Yes. You're probably too young to remember a cartoon from the 70s, 80s, early 80s called Jabberjaws. It was
Yeah, I
when
remember
Jaws was first super popular. So they made this
It was a shark.
Saturday
Ah!
Saturday morning cartoon shark.
That's
this
funny.
Great white anthropomorphic
No, what
shark.
was the
who
shark cartoon when I
talks
was a
and
kid?
he wouldn't stop talking, and he was a big goofball.
What was the shark cartoon when I was a kid? They were like all buff.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And they were like,
They had some cool action figures.
yes. Oh, that's gonna bother me. Street sharks? Street sharks?
So that sounds.
Say something
If
important.
it's
I'm
not,
gonna look
if
it
it's
up.
not that, it's something close to that.
They were like all ripped.
I think Ricky might have had.
That was a very big like boy thing.
We might have had some of those action figures. If not, I got them for myself and pretended that. they were
Yes,
for the kids.
street sharks. Why did we watch this?
Why would you not? I would watch that right now.
1994, BB.
It was the same. It's the same mentality as Teenage Mutant Ninja
But they're
Turtles.
sharks.
When I
And they're on land.
when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out in the comics before the movies and stuff,
This is
I'm like,
hilarious.
where have we gone as a society that this is what we do? And then I ended up falling in love with it. But put it right up there on the screen.
Street sharks.
That's awesome.
We had wild entertainment in the 90s.
Yes, right. So
I was big into the Gargoyles cartoon.
a lot of people were watching that. Yeah,
That was like the same animation as Batman
Yeah.
and all that. Anyway, it was
Yeah,
WB.
there was a lot of prime animation during that period.
Yes.
So the Disney after school stuff on ABC, that was pretty
Yep.
cool.
Yep. It's one Saturday morning. I watched that a lot.
That was the
Recess.
last gasps of Saturday morning cartoons
True.
at that point.
True.
Now it's all gone. Bygone days.
Bye bye. Woohoo.
So-
See ya. Anyway. You know what movie that's from?
No.
Toy Story. Where,
It is?
Where Buzz has an existential crisis.
Oh
He's
yeah.
Mrs. Nesbit.
Yeah, that's a
You
lot
see
of
the hat? Anyway, guys,
that's been a while. We're
been a while.
going full on 90s here today. So-
it's the mood I'm in. I'm sorry. It's the world I know. So what are we talking about?
We're talking about the fact that God governs in the affairs of men.
That's a
and
fact.
so, most of us have heard of Ben Franklin's quote about that, which is always interesting from an
I
Enlightenment
didn't know when
deist.
you said
So
that Ben Franklin was not a believer.
most of the founding fathers, while they were often churchmen, they were more aligned, most of them, with Enlightenment deism than with Christian theism. And so they revered the Christian religion, but as with any other period of time, the majority were not, whether confessional or otherwise, the majority were not what you would recognize as in a personal relationship with Christ.
Hmm.
The ones that were or claimed to be really stood out. You know, when you see some of the things from Patrick Henry or you know, John Quincy Adams in particular, there were a lot of there's a lot of nominal Christianity because that was the norm, which is also how you had with the Enlightenment was, even though it was a secular movement, was enabled, empowered, and fueled by Reformation thinking. Although most Enlightenment folks would deny such things, but that's absolutely true. And then the folks that were leading into this were coming out of the Great Awakening that had a huge impact in our nation. But just as every other awakening, when it doesn't continue as that broad movement, it like anything else, it becomes when it becomes big and vast, it ends up being a nominal type thing. We've seen that politically and sociologically throughout our nation's history, and even recently. The Tea Party was a small movement for, the purity of conservatism for a minute, and then it became its own thing, and it completely morphed into something else entirely. So when we see that type of thing in the church, we catch a moment, and that particular moment. You were speaking about the 90s earlier, the WWJD moment. Mm-hmm. That whole thing in the 90s,
and like the Jesus fish and the whatever.
Yeah. So in the late 60s, early 70s with the Jesus movement, you saw a lot of dynamics. That's when you started really, bumper stickers and magnets. I remember as a kid in the 70s, everything was, they would take like every commercial thing and spin it to a Christian deal. That carried on through the 80s and 90s. But what starts out as a vibrant movement ends up falling away into something else. Excuse me again. I hate to blow my nose on camera. So,
that's okay. You gotta not be mid-sentence.
I am not sick, I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Says the pile of Kleenex forming on the table.
This is the aftermath of that previous sickness. And anyway, so we see that like in the church as well. In the book of Acts, you see that initial wave, and then as it develops over time, it deepens in some areas and it becomes more shallow in others. And so that's why I don't often like to talk about Christianity, because it reduces Christianity to another world religion, as opposed to the reality that we're talking about a relationship with Christ, right, and the reality of all things being in him. It's not one option among equals.
And because of all these things that have happened, these moments in time of Christianity, people tend to use those moments to develop their own ideas about what it really is, about what it is. And it's often misconstrued.
Well, and you hear people talk now with this CNN idea of evangelical. And so evangelical gets thrown around as if it's a political category.
Right.
Has nothing to do with it. And 90% of the people I hear talk about evangelicals or evangelicalism have no clue what they're talking about. And it's not even closely related to it. So they'll align it with, evangelicals are, MAGA Republicans or whatever else, which there is a lot of crossover with that. But
that's not exclusive.
That's not what we're talking about. Right. You're talking about a commitment to God's word as authority, to a conversion experience in a personal faith, and an active faith that shares the gospel with other people. That's what evangelicals are. But we've made it everything else but that. And so a lot of people that would identify themselves as evangelical don't read the Bible, don't see it as their authority. I just had somebody tell me, the Bible's my authority. Really? Because you deny and ignore everything it says. I'm not sure how you would say that's your authority. So that's the problem you run into.
You keep using that word.
Well, and so we would see things like that in colonial times, in pre-revolutionary times, and that's where the Great Awakening became such a big deal, because there was a lot of church and not enough Christ and the Holy Spirit in people's lives. And so prominent figures like Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield, the Wesleys, and the Wesleys, I think, are just an outstanding study to look at, even though I have some struggles with John's theology in particular, both of them, but that's beside the point. I think all this is probably beside any point that we're supposed to be talking about.
That's what the podcast is for.
But when Wesley came through as a minister, he would himself say he wasn't even saved yet. Mm. So it wasn't until after going through this that caused a conviction in himself. And then the Lord, through some Moravians, brought about what he would describe as a strange warming of the heart. And there was a change, an inner change. And so then you see a whole new passion. But he was already passionate about the Christian religion. He was already passionate about the Word of God. He just didn't fully get it yet, by his accounts. He wouldn't use the same language that I'm using, but that's essentially what he was saying. Edwards came from a different background in New England, more of they both could, in a sense, be classified as Puritans because they were all from the Anglican tradition. But again, I'm veering far afield here. But what we see is that God has this plan that He's working through, and so America came about, and that's what Franklin recognized. And he wasn't the only one. There were so many that the United States of America happened ultimately because God wanted it to.
Right.
And some recognized that directly, some did not. One of the big struggles with Enlightenment thinking was when we saw this again in the 1800s, and the whole Invictus mindset that we see from that poem, that I'm the captain of my soul, and we as Americans, we're the ones, we pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. So you'll see a blend of such quotes from our founding fathers, where many of them will look at our effort as the only thing. Others will say it's only by God's grace. And so when Franklin says, I've lived for a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? As he's, saying this, that's not a very deistic perspective.
Right.
That's not an Enlightenment perspective necessarily. And so our founding fathers and that founding generation in particular, and I think even today, there's a strange blend of, I'll say, like a secular, motivational self-help kind of thing, mm-hmm. and Christianity. There's a syncretism that goes on there, and that's not a good thing, but it's a uniquely American version of both. So in any case, what he observed and what our founding fathers all to one extent or another seem to observe is that God is involved in our affairs, and that when God wills you to be in a certain situation, He does. That happens. So what we're seeing in the text, and now that we're at the end of the podcast, we're looking at Deuteronomy 2 verses 1 to 23, where Moses is recounting for this new generation as they're about to enter the land, how they got here. And so as they were traveling, when they finally left their wanderings and started to come toward the promised land, God brought them past 3 nations of distant relatives, the Edomites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites. And He said, this is not for you. This is, yes, this is here. And, you're more numerous than they are, and so on. But I give this to them. Mm-hmm. And they came in and they kicked out the giants because I drove them out. I did this. And it's a reminder.
It's not sick.
This is a terrible podcast. But anyway,
says who?
Don't listen to this podcast. Mm-hmm. Turn it off immediately.
It's our number one episode.
So as he's bringing them in here, he's reminding them, and it's abundantly clear, this is about God.
Yeah.
It's never been about you. And God blesses whomever he wills according to his sovereign plan. These three nations are not part of God's promise, this covenant promise. And yet he benevolently blesses them and he gives them this and he's faithful to them. And he drove out giants before these nations who were not his people. So why would his people doubt that he would do this for them? If he says, go in and take the land, it's such a contrast to what we saw previously where God brings them there. They see it's a good land. Wow, this is a fantastic situation. But there's giants. We're not doing it. And God says, look, I already did it for all the rest of these guys. And then, we'll see next week that he gives them victories as they're going in there against giants. Og, the king of Bashan you make this big deal in the scriptures about this 9-cubit bed. He's like Goliath sized. So there's this big guy and God defeats them. So there's no reason to be stressing about the rest of this stuff. Trust God, because ultimately in the end, he's going to do what he's going to do. He sets a limit on your wanderings. He determines where he's going to take you, and nothing can thwart his plans. And so that gives us no reason to be afraid. One of the things that's kind of almost feels random. It's not random at all, but there's a principle in there that God's people have to take responsibility for themselves. Mm-hmm. And he tells them specifically, as you go through this land, you pay for everything that you use. You nobody owes you anything. You go in here and pay for yourself. Excuse me. I'll let you take over.
You keep doing that in the middle of a sentence. I don't know what to say. But no, when you brought that up the other day during church, you also brought up, I think, what you had posted on Facebook, a meme, something about, that's kind of like leaning on a shovel and expecting there to be expecting a hole. And I think that it's something that I struggle with, and I know a lot of people who struggle with, wanting and wanting and wanting, and even praying and praying and praying. And there comes a point where that's good, but there comes a point where you have to do something. You have to get up and take responsibility for your own, I don't want to say your own actions, but what you're asking for,
Absolutely. A few weeks ago, we looked at when they're at the foot of Mount Sinai, and they'd had this great moment with God and a terrible moment with the calf. But as God gives them 10 commandments and he's sending them out, this is this fantastic experience. They actually get to see, the presence of God on the mountain with Moses. And God says, that's it. You stayed here long enough. In other words, do something. It's time to move. It's time to, we can't just sit here and
dare you to move.
I dare you to move. You were meant to live. And so I think we can fall into that trap, like you said, where we're like, well, I'm just going to pray and let God take care of it. Or if
God wants this to happen, it'll happen. Or I'll get a sign, or,
And that's the balance, that responsibility is kind of the balance that God gives to us. Yes, I will give you what I decide to give you. Mm-hmm. Yes, my plans will come to pass and cannot be thwarted. However, there is a requirement for you to act in faith no matter what. So I'm going to give you the land. Now you go in and start taking possession of it. And so just little phrases that he uses, like begin to take possession, not just go in and take it, but go in and begin to take possession. And so there are times when God does the fighting for them and all they have to do is go in and pick up the loot. That happens much later on in their history. There are times when they have to go in and do battle. They have to go in and do the work. But in any case, they must get up and actually walk forward and work. Their work, their effort isn't what wins the battle for them. It's God's victory. God gives it to them. Has nothing to do with the strength of the army, the strength of the horses, has everything to do with God. But you still have to go in and do it.
Right.
And that's his requirement for his people. And that's not different today. Like you said, it's easy for us to sit and stew and like, oh gosh, I don't know. There's nothing I can do here. So, and I don't mean to say that there aren't times that we literally can't do anything.
But do what you can do.
Right. There are times that we can't do anything else but pray. But one of my favorite things about Chuck Swindoll my favorite preacher throughout my life, is that he really emphasizes this balance and draws out from the scripture the reality that there's a time to pray, there's a time to work. God doesn't want you praying 24 hours on your knees. It doesn't mean we don't pray without ceasing. It means that sometimes we pray while we're pushing the shovel. We're going to go out and do the work, and when that work is to be done, you do it. And farming is a good example of that. Nobody is more obviously reliant on God's blessing than the farmer. You don't control the rain. You plant the seed and let God take care of the rest. But there's constant work to do in the maintenance of that, in the tending, and that's what God's called us to. All the way back in the Garden of Eden, He called us to work. But we were in perfect communion with God. There was no sin. There was no sin, no hardship, no pain, no death, none of these things. But He still called us to tend the garden. He still called us to exercise His rule on His behalf over His creation.
Okay, we're going to stop there for today. I'm not sure that we talked about it, but Rich is not sick, but hopefully he'll feel better next week.
Not sick.
So thank you guys for listening. We are in Deuteronomy.
I will try not to be disgusting next
time. I will.
No promises.
We are in Deuteronomy. We are still, relatively early into this chapter. So feel free to join us on Sunday mornings if you're in the area, or listen.
We're just in chapter 2.
Yeah.
We'll be in chapters 2 and 3 next week. We'll take a bigger chunk.
Year.
Oh, yeah. No, we'll be in chapter 3. This, we'll be moving on to it, but this is the fast part. Just wait till we get to the slow part. So.
But yeah, thank you. So yeah, join us, and if you're in the area, or you can watch online on Sunday mornings at around 10 o'clock, or you can listen to the sermons later wherever you're getting this podcast. So thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Ciao.
Farewell, YouTube.